I'm sitting here on this porch in Newark watching the neighborhood wake up, and I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd say out loud. My father, God rest him, nearly destroyed everything I had, and I almost let him do it. I mean, he was my father. You don't question that kind of authority, right? But this story, it matters. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in what I'm about to share, I need you to know you're not alone. Please, stick with me. The winter was brutal that year. Windows fogged up from the heat inside my old house in that mixed-income neighborhood with all the older homes near downtown, and I remember thinking life was finally settling into something peaceful. I was wearing my crimson velvet robe that morning, the one I'd saved from better days, the one that still felt like the woman I used to be. I'd spent years pressing flowers between the pages of my Bible, little moments of beauty I could hold on to. My hobby, my escape. On the shelf in the kitchen sat my coffee can full of saved buttons, every one of them a memory from clothes long gone. And under the glass dome on the counter, my pound cake waiting for Sunday dinner. My father had moved in with me about 7 years before this. He'd had some health issues, and I thought family takes care of family. He had access to everything. My bank accounts, my property papers, everything. He told me it was easier that way. He said, "I'm the man of the house, and men handle these things." I believed him. God help me. I believed him because that's what I was raised to do, believe men when they spoke with authority. But here's where it gets ugly. Over those years, money started disappearing. Not a little bit. We're talking thousands of dollars. I'd see charges I never made, withdrawals I never authorized, and when I'd ask him about it, he'd just shake his head and say I was confused, that I was getting old, that my mind wasn't what it used to be. And you know what? I started to believe that too. That's the thing about living with someone who's slowly stealing from you. They convince you that you're the problem. Your own perception becomes the enemy. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I was losing my mind, if maybe I had spent that money and forgotten. Self-doubt will destroy you faster than any thief ever could. I gave up so much trying to keep the peace, my heirlooms, pieces from my mother. I sold them without understanding why I was selling them. The property taxes kept going unpaid, and the house started slipping away from me. I'd worked my whole life for that house, and it was disappearing like smoke. Then one morning, a stranger came to my door, a social worker from the senior center doing a wellness check. She asked me simple questions, and somewhere in answering them, the whole thing just cracked open. She asked about my finances, about my property, about my living situation. And when I tried to explain the confusion, she didn't accept it. She pushed. She said, "Has anyone told you that you're confused about money? Has anyone made you feel like your judgment can't be trusted?" And I started crying right there in my living room because that's exactly what had been happening. We pulled out the old photographs together. I found one of me from 30 years ago, standing in front of my house with the biggest smile. I looked so strong, so sure, and I didn't even recognize her anymore. That's when I collapsed. Not physically, but something inside me just gave way. All those years of doubt, all that self-blame, it came pouring out. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. There's nowhere to go but up. I became my own detective. I gathered documents, printed statements, found the proof that had been staring me in the face the whole time. I wasn't crazy. I was being stolen from, plain and simple. And I wasn't the only one. My sister had stories. My cousin had stories. When we started talking, really talking, we realized my father had been doing this for years. To different family members, different versions of the same manipulation. We came together, the three of us who knew the truth, and we walked into that courthouse together, not to hurt him, but to stop him. The confrontation happened right where he'd done so much of his damage. That old house of mine. We met him there with the documents, with our voices, with our truth. His reputation in the community, the one he'd built on being The man of the house. It didn't survive the light. People knew. People talked. His church friends knew. His own grandchildren knew. And suddenly, he wasn't the authority figure anymore. He was just a man who'd stolen from his own family. I moved out of that house and into a senior living studio with a kitchenette and a shared hallway in a different part of town. Smaller space, sure, but it's mine. I sleep in the middle of the bed now. No one telling me where I should be, no one stealing my peace. And eventually, I made my way to a cozy cottage near an old friend from church, and that's where I am now. Still got my daily devotional book with the dog-eared pages. Still got my Bible with the pressed flowers. But now I know the difference between faith and blind faith. And let me tell you what I've learned that matters most. These manipulators, they follow a playbook. They isolate you. They make you doubt yourself. They gain access to your finances and your trust. Then they gaslight you into thinking you're the one who's confused. They use authority. I'm the man of the house to shut down your questions. Once I recognized the pattern, I could see it everywhere. And here's what shocked me when I started researching. I'm not alone in this silence. Research indicates that only 5% of abused Latino seniors report to authorities. Can you believe that? 1.5%. The rest of us? We suffer quietly because we're ashamed or we don't think anyone will believe us. And it gets worse. In Japan, underreporting is extreme, with only 4 cases in every 10. Reaching authorities. The numbers are terrifying because they show how many of us are still trapped in the silence I almost died in. If you're watching this, and someone in your life has made you doubt your own mind about money, about property, about what's real, that's a warning signal. Trust yourself. Talk to someone. Don't wait 40 years like I almost did. What's your story? Have you recognized yourself in mine? Let me know in the comments. And if this helped you see something you needed to see, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button and subscribe so this message reaches the people who need to hear it most. You never know who might be suffering in silence, waiting for permission to speak up. Now let me take you back to where this really started. Not when my father moved in 7 years ago. No, it goes further than that. It goes back to when I was a young woman, still believing in the fairy tale that family always meant safety. I'd worked 2 jobs most of my adult life, saved every penny I could. I wasn't rich, but I had something. I had my dignity and my home and a little nest egg that represented 30 years of getting up before dawn to clean office buildings and then spending afternoons watching other people's children. My father was always there in the background of my life, this commanding presence who spoke in absolutes. He'd show up for Sunday dinners, always with opinions about how I should be managing things, how I should be raising my kids, how I should be handling my finances. A woman needs guidance, he'd say. That's just how it is. And I'd nod and serve the pound cake and think, well, he's my father, he must know best. When my mother died, something shifted in him. Or maybe it had always been there and I just hadn't seen it. He started having what he called episodes, dizzy spells, confusion, moments where he'd forget where he was. My siblings lived out of state, scattered across the country chasing their own fortunes. I was the one here in Newark, the one still in the old neighborhood. So naturally, I was the one who got the call when he fell in his apartment. Naturally, I was the one who said, "Come stay with me. We'll figure this out together." He arrived with 2 suitcases and a Lincoln Navigator in burgundy red that he'd somehow acquired. I never asked where the money came from for that car. I should have. But by then, I'd learned not to question him too directly. He had a way of turning questions back on you, making you feel small for asking. "You doubt your own father?" he'd say, with that look that made you feel like the worst kind of ungrateful child. The first few months were okay. He had his room, I had mine. We ate meals together. I'd make his favorite foods, trying to recreate the way my mother used to cook. I'd sit there pressing flowers between the pages of my Bible in the evenings while he watched television. And I'd think, see, this is what family does. This is what love looks like: sacrifice, patience, service. But then the bills started piling up: property tax notices I didn't remember receiving, credit card statements for accounts I didn't remember opening. When I'd ask him about it, he'd wave his hand dismissively. "I took care of it," he'd say. "Don't worry your head about money. That's man's work." And because I'd been raised in a generation where you respected your elders, especially your father, I let it go. I pushed down that little voice inside that said something wasn't right. The winter got colder. I'd sit in my crimson velvet robe with the heat turned up, watching the windows fog over, and I'd feel this strange disconnection from my own life. Like I was watching someone else live it. The coffee can full of buttons on the shelf became this odd comfort to me. I'd sort through them sometimes, remembering the clothes they came from. Each button was a different version of myself. The navy blue one from my Sunday dress when I was 30. The pearl one from the blouse I wore to my daughter's graduation. The red one from a coat I'd loved. All these pieces of who I used to be, stored away in a can. My daily devotional book became my lifeline. I'd read it every morning, searching for some kind of guidance, some kind of sign that I was doing the right thing. The pages were so worn, so dog-eared from constant use. I'd underline passages that spoke to endurance, to suffering, to the rewards that come from being a dutiful daughter. Now I see how twisted that was, using faith to justify my own destruction. But at the time, it felt like survival. I gave up my hobby entirely. No more pressing flowers, no more little moments of beauty captured and preserved. There wasn't time. My father needed constant attention, doctor's appointments, medication management, meals prepared exactly how he liked them. And the money kept disappearing. My savings account that had once held over $60,000, money I'd saved for emergencies, for my old age, for my grandchildren's education. It dwindled down to almost nothing within 3 years. When I'd try to access my own accounts online, I'd find the passwords had been changed. When I'd call the bank, they'd tell me that my father had power of attorney, that he was authorized to make all decisions. I didn't remember signing those papers, but he showed me my signature. "You did this last year," he said. "You were confused that day. Don't you remember? We talked about how it would be easier if I handled everything." And I'd stare at that signature, trying to remember, trying to trust my own mind, and coming up empty. I remember one specific afternoon in late January. The snow was falling outside, thick and heavy, muffling all the sounds of the neighborhood. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of envelopes in front of me, red ink, final notice, urgent, words that made my stomach clench. The property tax bill was 3 months overdue. The water bill hadn't been paid in 6 weeks. There was a letter from the mortgage company threatening foreclosure proceedings. My hands were shaking as I opened each envelope. I couldn't understand it. I'd given my father money every month specifically for these bills. He'd take the cash, fold it carefully into his wallet, and assure me it would be handled. "Don't you worry," he'd say, patting my hand like I was a child. "Papa's got everything under control." But nothing was under control. Everything was falling apart, and I couldn't understand how or why. I walked to his room, the envelopes clutched in my hand. He was watching television, some news program with the volume turned up too loud. "Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk about these bills." He didn't even look at me, just kept watching the screen. "What bills?" "The property tax, the utilities, the mortgage. They're saying we're behind, way behind." He waved his hand dismissively, still not looking at me. "I took care of all that." "But they're saying, are you calling me a liar?" Now he turned, and the look on his face made me step back. "I said I took care of it. Are you saying I didn't?" "No, I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. That's the whole point. I handle the money because you can't. You get confused. You forget things. How many times do I have to tell you this? I stood there holding those envelopes, tears starting to blur my vision, and I felt something inside me crumble. He was right, wasn't he? I must be confused. I must be forgetting. Why else would there be this disconnect between what I thought was happening and what was actually happening? I'm sorry, I heard myself say. I didn't mean to accuse you. I'm just worried. He softened then, just slightly. I know, mija, but that's why I'm here, to take care of these things so you don't have to worry. Now go make us some coffee, okay? And stop looking at those bills. They're just trying to scare you. I'll handle it. I went back to the kitchen, made the coffee, put the bills in a drawer where I wouldn't have to look at them. Told myself that everything would be fine because my father said so, and fathers don't lie to their daughters. Fathers protect, fathers care. That's what family means. The property taxes went unpaid for 2 years. I didn't know. He was supposed to be handling it. Then one day, I got a notice from the county saying my house was going into foreclosure. My house. The house I'd lived in for 38 years. The house where I'd raised my children. The house that represented every sacrifice I'd ever made. Gone. Just like that. When I confronted him, he got angry. Really angry. He stood up from his chair and said, I'm the man of this house and you will not question me. I've given my whole life to this family, and this is the thanks I get? You ungrateful. He didn't finish the sentence, but the look in his eyes finished it for him. I was nothing. I was less than nothing. I was an old woman who couldn't even manage her own affairs, who needed a man to think for her. That night, I lay in bed listening to him snore in the next room, and I thought about all the times I'd defended him to my children. He's just old-fashioned, I'd say. He means well. My daughter had tried to warn me. She'd noticed things weren't adding up, but I'd shut her down. Don't disrespect your grandfather, I'd told her. Family takes care of family. Now I wondered if I'd sacrificed my relationship with my own children to protect a man who was robbing me blind. The heirlooms went next, my mother's jewelry, the silver tea service that had been in our family for 4 generations, the antique clock that my grandmother had brought over from Puerto Rico. One by one, they disappeared. He'd sell them, he said, to pay bills, to keep us afloat. Do you want to end up on the street? He'd ask. Is that what you want? And I'd shake my head and sign whatever papers he put in front of me and watch pieces of my history vanish like they'd never existed. I remember the day the tea service disappeared. I'd gone to dust it, part of my Sunday routine, and it was just gone. The shelf where it had sat for decades was empty. I stood there staring at that empty space, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Dad, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Where's Mama's tea service? He came into the room, casual, like we were discussing the weather. Oh, that, I sold it. You? You sold it? We needed the money. The electric bill was overdue. You want them to cut off the electricity? But that was my mother's. It was supposed to go to my daughter. Your daughter doesn't need an old tea service. She needs a grandmother who can keep the lights on. He looked at me then, and there was something almost triumphant in his eyes. Or would you rather I let you end up in the dark, clutching your precious heirlooms? What could I say to that? He'd backed me into a corner where the only choices were agreeing with him or admitting I cared more about things than survival. So I said nothing. I turned away and went back to my room and cried into my pillow where he wouldn't hear. This became the pattern. He'd sell something. I'd discover it missing. He'd justify it as necessary for our survival. I'd feel guilty for questioning him. The cycle repeated until there was almost nothing left. Not just the physical items, but pieces of my identity. Each heirloom that disappeared took a part of me with it. I stopped seeing my friends from church. I stopped going to the community center where I used to volunteer. I stopped doing anything that wasn't directly related to taking care of him or trying to salvage what was left of my finances. My world got smaller and smaller until it was just me and him and that house that was no longer mine, and the winter cold seeping in through windows I couldn't afford to replace. My daughter would call, and I'd lie to her. "Everything's fine," I'd say. "Your grandfather is doing well. We're managing." Because what else could I say? That I'd been a fool? That I'd let a man steal my entire life? That I was so ashamed I could barely look at myself in the mirror? The truth was too heavy to speak out loud. But the truth has a way of coming out anyway. It seeps through the cracks. It shows up in the tremor in your voice when you say everything's fine. It appears in the dark circles under your eyes from nights spent lying awake, trying to figure out where all the money went. It manifests in the way you flinch when someone asks you a direct question because you've learned that every question is a trap. The discovery happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was sitting on that front porch, wrapped in my crimson velvet robe, watching the neighborhood wake up. The cold was bitter, the kind that gets into your bones and stays there. A car pulled up. A woman got out. She was young, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a clipboard. "Mrs. Rodriguez," she said, "I'm Julia Martinez from the Senior Resource Center. We're doing wellness checks in the area. Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" I almost said no. I almost sent her away. But something in her face, something in the way she smiled, made me open the door. We sat in my living room, her on the old couch, me in the chair by the window. She asked simple questions at first. How was my health? Was I eating regularly? Did I feel safe in my home? That last question. That's the one that broke me. Did I feel safe in my home? I opened my mouth to say yes, of course. Why wouldn't I? But what came out instead was, I don't know. And then the tears came. Years of tears, decades of tears. All the crying I'd swallowed down came pouring out. Julia didn't rush me. She sat there, quiet and patient while I sobbed. When I finally caught my breath, she said, "Tell me about your finances. Who manages them?" And I told her. I told her everything. About my father, about the missing money, about the passwords I couldn't access, about the property taxes and the foreclosure and the heirlooms that were gone, about how I didn't trust my own memory anymore, how I'd started to believe I was losing my mind. She took notes. She asked for documentation. And then she said something that changed everything. She said, "Mrs. Rodriguez, has anyone ever told you that what you're describing sounds like financial abuse?" Financial abuse. I'd never heard those words put together like that. Abuse was physical, wasn't it? Abuse was hitting and screaming and obvious violence. It wasn't. This slow erosion of everything you'd ever worked for. This constant questioning of your own reality. "Let me ask you something," she continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Has your father ever made you feel confused about money on purpose? Has he ever told you that you're too old to understand, that you're not capable of managing your own affairs? Has he isolated you from friends or family who might ask questions?" Every word she said was like a light switch flipping on. Yes, yes, yes. That's exactly what had been happening. For 7 years, I'd been living in a fog, thinking I was the problem, thinking my mind was going, thinking I was a burden. But I wasn't. I was being systematically robbed by someone who was supposed to protect me. Julia helped me pull out old bank statements. We spread them across my kitchen table, next to the coffee can full of buttons and the pound cake under its glass dome. We went through everything, line by line. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. Large withdrawals every few weeks, transfers to accounts I'd never heard of, charges for luxury items I'd never seen, a fortune, my small fortune, disappearing a few $100s at a time. "Look here," Julia said, pointing to a series of withdrawals. $500, $500, $500, every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Did you authorize these? I stared at the numbers. No, I don't. I don't remember authorizing anything like that. And here, this transfer to an account ending in 4782. Do you know what account that is? I shook my head. My hands were trembling. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is systematic. This isn't confusion or forgetfulness. This is deliberate theft. Hearing her say it out loud, so matter-of-factly, it was like being doused with cold water. Theft. My father was a thief. The man who was supposed to love me, protect me, honor me, he was stealing from me. Had been stealing from me for years. And then she pulled out the photographs. Old photos I'd stored in a box in the closet. Photos from 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Photos of me looking strong and confident and sure of myself. There was one in particular that made me stop breathing. Me, standing in front of this house when I'd first bought it. I was maybe 35 in that photo, wearing a blue dress with my hair pulled back, and I was smiling like I'd just won the lottery. Because I had, in a way. I'd won the right to own my own home, to build my own life, to be somebody. I held that photo and I stared at the woman in it, and I didn't recognize her. Where had she gone? When had I stopped being her? And that's when it hit me, really hit me. I'd given up everything, not just money and property. I'd given up myself. I'd surrendered the woman in that photograph to become someone else's idea of who I should be. Someone smaller, someone quieter, someone who didn't ask questions or trust her own judgment or believe she deserved better. I collapsed then. Right there at my kitchen table, I just broke. All those years of holding it together, of being strong, of telling myself this was what family did for each other, it all came crashing down. Julia held me while I cried. She didn't try to fix it or make it better. She just let me feel it. The loss, the betrayal, the shame, all of it. When I finally stopped crying, when I could breathe again, she said, "You're not alone in this, and you're not crazy. What he did to you, what he's been doing, it's a crime, and we can stop it. But you have to be willing to fight." Fight. I hadn't fought for anything in so long. I'd forgotten how. But looking at that photo of my younger self, I thought, maybe it's time to remember. Over the next few days, I became someone I didn't recognize, someone harder, someone who asked questions and demanded answers. I went to the bank with Julia by my side. I showed them the power of attorney papers, the ones I supposedly signed but had no memory of. I asked them to review the signature. They couldn't confirm it was genuine. I asked for copies of every transaction my father had authorized. Pages and pages of them. Thousands and thousands of dollars. Gone. The bank manager, a middle-aged man with sympathetic eyes, looked over the documents and said, "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm going to be honest with you. This looks like fraud. We should have caught this earlier. Someone should have flagged these patterns." "Why didn't they?" I asked, and I was surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. He shifted uncomfortably. "Your father was very convincing. He had all the right paperwork. And frankly, we don't always look as closely as we should when family members are involved." That was the moment I understood the full scope of it. He hadn't just manipulated me. He'd manipulated everyone, the bank, the mortgage company, my friends, my children. He'd built this elaborate facade of being the responsible caretaker, and everyone had bought it. Everyone had believed that a man managing his daughter's finances was normal, natural, even admirable. No one had questioned it, because why would they? I went to a lawyer, a real estate lawyer first, to see if there was any way to stop the foreclosure. She looked at my documents and shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. "This has gone too far. The house is gone." But then she said something else. She said, "But your father committed fraud. You can pursue criminal charges. You can get restitution." Criminal charges against my own father. The thought made me sick, but what choice did I have? Let him keep stealing? Let him destroy what little I had left? I started reaching out to other family members, cautiously at first. A phone call to my sister in Chicago. "Has Dad ever asked you for money?" I asked. Silence on the other end. Then, "Why?" I told her everything. More silence. Then, "He did the same thing to me, 10 years ago. I lost my business income because of him. I never told anyone because I was so ashamed." We talked for 2 hours that night. She told me how he'd convinced her to invest in a business opportunity that never existed, how he'd forged her name on loan documents, how he'd ruined her credit and left her scrambling to rebuild her life. She'd carried that shame for a decade, never speaking about it, thinking she was the only one foolish enough to fall for his schemes. My cousin in Florida, same story. He'd convinced her to co-sign on a loan he never paid back, ruined her credit. She'd spent years rebuilding her net worth. My other sister in California. He'd taken out credit cards in her name without her knowledge, racked up debt, then disappeared when the bills came due. We were all victims, all of us, and we'd all stayed silent because we were ashamed, because we thought we were the only ones. Because family is supposed to protect family, and how do you admit that your own father is a thief? We started talking, the 4 of us. Regular phone calls, shared documents, shared stories. We compared notes and realized the pattern had been there all along. He'd been doing this for decades, moving from one family member to another, taking what he could, using our love and our sense of duty against us. And we'd let him because we didn't know any better. My sister from Chicago said something during one of our calls that stuck with me. She said, "You know what the worst part is? I spent 10 years thinking I was stupid, 10 years beating myself up for being so naive. But I wasn't stupid. I was loving. And he weaponized that love against me. That's exactly what it was. A weaponization of love. He knew we loved him. He knew we felt obligated to him. He knew we'd been raised to respect our elders, to honor our parents, to put family first. And he used every bit of that knowledge to exploit us. It was calculated. It was deliberate. It was evil, plain and simple. Together, we filed a police report. Together, we gathered evidence. Together, we went to the prosecutor's office and laid it all out. The fraud, the theft, the manipulation. The detective who took our case, a woman named Sarah with gray hair and sharp eyes, listened to all of us speak and then said, "This is one of the most systematic cases of elder abuse I've seen. He targeted his own family, the people who trusted him most. We're going to pursue this." And together, we decided where the final confrontation would happen. Not in a courtroom, not yet, but in the place where so much of this had started. My house. The house that was about to be foreclosed on. The house that represented everything he'd taken from me. We set a date. All of us would be there. My sisters, my cousin, my children who'd flown in to support me, and my father. I called him and told him we needed to have a family meeting. "Something important to discuss," I said. He agreed easily. He had no idea what was coming. The day of the meeting, I woke up before dawn. I put on my crimson velvet robe, and I sat on that porch one last time, watching the neighborhood wake up. I thought about all the mornings I'd sat there feeling helpless and confused. All the mornings I'd wondered if I was losing my mind. This would be the last morning I felt that way. The sunrise was spectacular that morning, all pink and orange streaking across the winter sky. I watched it and thought about beginnings and endings, about how sometimes they're the same thing. This was an ending, yes, but it was also a beginning. The end of my silence, the beginning of my voice. They started arriving around 10. My sisters came together, united in a way we hadn't been since we were children. My cousin came with her husband. My children came with their partners. And then my father pulled up in that burgundy red Lincoln Navigator, the one he'd somehow afforded to buy with money that should have been mine. He walked in expecting a normal family gathering. Maybe he thought we'd have lunch. Maybe he thought we'd talk about his health care or make plans for the holidays. Instead, he found all of us sitting around my dining room table with documents spread out in front of us. Bank statements, legal papers, police reports. His face went white. "What is this?" he asked, and I could hear the edge of panic in his voice. I stood up. I was shaking. But I stood up. I said, "This is the truth, Dad. This is everything you've done to me, to all of us, and it's over." He tried to leave. He actually turned around and headed for the door. But my son-in-law was blocking it. "You need to listen," he said. "You need to hear what you've done." My sister from Chicago went first. She detailed every dollar he'd taken from her, every lie he'd told. My cousin went next, showing the credit report that had taken her years to repair. My other sister showed the credit card statements in her name, thousands of dollars of debt she'd had to pay off. And then it was my turn. I laid out every bank statement, every forged signature, every unauthorized withdrawal, every lie about my mental state. Every time he'd told me I was confused or too old to understand. Every heirloom sold, every dollar stolen. I showed him the photograph of me from 30 years ago, standing in front of this house. "This is who I was," I said. "Before you made me doubt every thought in my head, before you stole everything I'd worked for, this is who I'm going back to being." He didn't apologize, didn't try to explain. He just sat there, getting smaller and smaller as each of us spoke. When we were done, I said the words I'd been practicing all week. "You are no longer welcome in my life. You will not contact me. You will not come to my home. You will pay back what you've stolen, one way or another, and if you refuse, we will pursue every legal avenue available to us." The silence that followed was deafening. Then he stood up. He looked at each of us, and for a moment I thought he might say something, an apology, an explanation, something. But instead he just said, "I'm the man of this house." Like that phrase still held any power, like we would still bow to it. "Not anymore," I said. "You're nothing here. You're just a thief who got caught." He left. We heard the Lincoln Navigator start up and drive away, and then, for the first time in 7 years, I felt like I could breathe. My daughter came and put her arms around me. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," she whispered. And I started crying again. But these were different tears. These were tears of relief, of release, of something that felt almost like freedom. The legal process took months. The prosecutor took our case seriously. My father was charged with multiple counts of financial fraud and elder abuse. His reputation in the community, the one he'd built carefully over decades, crumbled overnight. People at his church found out, his neighbors found out, his friends found out. The man who'd presented himself as a pillar of the community, the man who'd always had opinions about how everyone else should live their lives, was exposed as a fraud. The court ordered restitution. He'd have to pay back what he'd stolen, though we all knew we'd probably never see most of it. The money was gone, spent on that Lincoln Navigator, and who knows what else. But it didn't matter anymore. The point wasn't the money. The point was that he couldn't hurt us anymore. He couldn't make us doubt ourselves. He couldn't steal our peace. I lost the house. That part couldn't be undone. But I found something better. I found my voice. I found my strength. I found the woman in that photograph, the one who'd been buried under years of manipulation and doubt. She was still there. She'd always been there. She was just waiting for permission to speak up. I moved out of that house before the foreclosure was final. I couldn't afford to stay anyway, and I didn't want to. Too many bad memories. Too much pain in those walls. I found a small studio in a senior living community across town. Kitchenette, shared hallway, just enough space for me and my essentials. I brought my coffee can full of buttons. I brought my daily devotional book with the dog-eared pages. I brought my Bible with the pressed flowers still tucked between the pages. On my first night there, I did something I hadn't done in 7 years. I slept in the middle of the bed, not curled up on one side, trying to take up as little space as possible, right in the middle, stretched out, claiming the space as mine. It sounds like such a small thing, but it felt revolutionary. This was my bed, my space, my life. No one was going to take it from me again. The transformation didn't happen overnight. There were hard days. Days when I'd wake up feeling the shame all over again, wondering how I'd been so stupid, so blind. Days when I'd see an elderly man on the street and flinch, expecting my father's face. Days when I'd check my bank account 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, just to make sure the money was still there. But there were good days too. Days when I'd remember that I wasn't stupid, I was victimized. There's a difference. Days when I'd talk to other women at the senior center and realize how many of us had similar stories. Days when I'd open my daily devotional and the passage would be about strength instead of endurance, about justice instead of suffering. My friend from church, Margaret, reached out to me during this time. We'd lost touch over the years while I was isolated in that house with my father. She didn't judge me. She didn't ask why I'd let it happen. She just said, "I have a little cottage. It's empty right now. My daughter was living there, but she moved. Would you like to rent it? I'll make the price something you can afford." It felt like a gift from God, a real second chance. The cottage was perfect. Small, yes, but perfect. It had a little porch where I could sit and watch the sunrise. It had a garden where I could start pressing flowers again. It had windows that let in the light without the fog of confusion and fear. Margaret lived next door, and we started having coffee together every morning. Real conversations. The kind where you don't have to lie or pretend or hide the truth. I started volunteering at the senior center again. This time, though, I wasn't just there to help serve lunch or organize activities. I was there to talk to other seniors about financial abuse, to help them recognize the signs, to let them know they weren't alone. Julia, the social worker who'd saved my life, helped me put together a presentation. We called it Recognizing Financial Exploitation in Your Own Home. The first time I gave that presentation, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold my notes. But I got through it. I told my story. I showed them the tactics, the isolation, the confusion, the way abusers make you doubt your own mind, the way they use authority and family obligation as weapons. When I finished, 3 women came up to me in tears. "This is happening to me right now," one of them said. I thought I was going crazy. We helped those women, connected them with lawyers, with social workers, with support groups. We helped them document the abuse, gather evidence, file reports. It's hard work, this kind of advocacy. It tears open old wounds every time. But it's also healing. Every woman we help, every person who escapes, it's like saving myself all over again. My relationship with my children improved too. They'd been so frustrated with me during those years with my father, watching me defend him, watching me disappear into his manipulation. Now they understood why. We talked openly about what had happened. We went to family therapy together. We rebuilt trust. My daughter told me, "I'm glad I got my mom back, the real one, the strong one." As for my father, I haven't seen him since that confrontation in my old house. I heard through family that he moved to another state, started over somewhere where people didn't know his story. Part of me hopes he learned something, that he changed. But mostly I just hope he's not hurting anyone else. I don't wish him harm, but I don't wish him back in my life either. That door is closed and locked, and I threw away the key. 6 months after I moved into Margaret's cottage, I went back to my old neighborhood. Not to the house that was long gone, sold to new owners who had no idea about its history. But I went to the park nearby, the one where I used to take my children when they were small. I sat on a bench and I pulled out that old photograph, the one of me standing proud in front of my house. I looked at that woman and I finally felt like I knew her again. The spark in her eyes, the confidence in her stance, the smile that said she'd earned everything she had. That's me, I thought. That was always me. I just forgot for a while. But I'm back now. Older, sure. Scarred, definitely. But back. And stronger than before because now I know what I'm capable of surviving. I started a small consulting business, if you can call it that, helping other seniors navigate financial systems, set up proper protections, recognize red flags. I'm not getting rich from it, but that's not the point. The point is using what happened to me to help others, turning my pain into purpose. One afternoon, I was working with a woman named Rosa. She was 73, living with her son who'd been draining her pension checks. She was so beaten down, so convinced she was the problem. I held her hand and I said, "Listen to me. You are not crazy. You are not a burden. You are being abused, and you deserve better." She looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "How do you know? How can you be so sure?" And I said, "Because I lived it, and I survived it, and so will you." That's when I realized the full weight of what I'd gained from this nightmare. Not just my freedom, though that matters. Not just my sense of self, though that matters too. But the ability to look another person in the eye and say, "I know, I understand. You're not alone." That's worth more than any amount of money my father stole. The education I got from this experience is invaluable. I learned that manipulators follow patterns. They isolate you first, cutting you off from friends and family who might ask questions or offer different perspectives. They establish themselves as the authority, the one who knows best, the one whose judgment should never be questioned. They gain access to your resources, your accounts, your assets. Then they gaslight you, making you doubt your own memory, your own perception, your own reality. They use your love against you, your sense of duty, your cultural values about family and respect for elders. They know exactly which buttons to push because they've been watching you your whole life. They know your weaknesses, your fears, your desperate desire to be a good daughter or son or grandparent, and they exploit it without mercy. But here's what else I learned. You can break the pattern. It's hard. It requires courage you didn't know you had. It requires accepting that someone you love is hurting you on purpose. It requires being willing to face shame and judgment and the possibility that some people won't believe you. But you can do it. I did it. And if I can do it at 61, after 7 years of abuse, anyone can. The statistics I found while researching are haunting. I learned that research indicates that only 1.5% of abused Latino seniors report to authorities. 1.5%. Think about that. For every one of us who speaks up, there are hundreds suffering in silence. We don't report because we're ashamed, because we think it's our fault, because we don't want to hurt our families, because we're afraid no one will believe us. The culture of respect for elders, which should protect us, ends up trapping us instead. And it's not just Latino communities. In Japan, underreporting is extreme, with only 4 cases in every 10 izuzur reaching authorities. 4 in 10,000. The rest, thousands and thousands of elderly people, are being abused and exploited, and no one knows. No one's tracking it. No one's stopping it. They're invisible victims of a crime that happens behind closed doors in the name of family. These numbers tell us something crucial. Elder financial abuse isn't rare. It's not unusual. It's epidemic. It's happening in every community, every culture, every income level. And it thrives in silence. It thrives in shame. It thrives in the belief that we should handle family problems privately, that we should forgive and forget, that blood is thicker than water, even when that blood is draining us dry. So here's what I want you to know. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if someone in your life has made you doubt your own mind about money, about property, about what's real, that's a warning signal. Trust yourself. Your instincts are probably right. That confusion you feel isn't dementia or old age. It's a deliberate tactic designed to keep you compliant. Talk to someone outside the family, a social worker, a lawyer, a trusted friend. Show them your bank statements. Let them ask the questions you're afraid to ask. Give yourself permission to investigate without guilt. You're not betraying your family by protecting yourself. You're not being paranoid by wanting to understand your own finances. You're being smart. You're being responsible. You're being your own best advocate. Document everything. Keep copies of statements, emails, texts, anything that shows the pattern of control or manipulation or theft. Take photos of important documents. Save them somewhere the abuser can't access. Build your case slowly and carefully, because you will need evidence if you decide to take legal action. Find your allies. Whether it's other family members who've been victimized, friends who've noticed something's wrong, or professionals who specialize in elder abuse. You can't fight this alone. I couldn't have done it without my sisters, my cousin, Julia from the Senior Center. the lawyer who took my case seriously. Build your team. And know this, it's not too late. I was 61 when I finally broke free. I'd lost 7 years and most of my fortune. I lost my house, my heirlooms, my savings. But I got something more important back. I got myself, the woman I used to be, the woman I'd forgotten I could be. If I can reclaim that at 61, you can reclaim it at any age. Today, I'm sitting in my cottage, drinking coffee with Margaret, watching the morning light come through windows that are all mine. My daily devotional book is open on the table. My Bible with its pressed flowers is on the shelf. The coffee can full of buttons sits in my little kitchenette, a reminder of all the different versions of myself I've been. And I'm okay. More than okay. I'm free. I sleep in the middle of the bed. I manage my own money. I make my own decisions. I don't have to ask permission or justify my choices. I don't have to doubt my own reality or question my own memory. I trust myself now in a way I never did before. And that trust, that certainty, it's worth more than any property or fortune I lost. The journey isn't over. I still have hard days. I still wake up sometimes feeling angry or ashamed or scared. But those feelings pass faster now. They don't define me anymore. They're just visitors, not permanent residents. And I have tools now for dealing with them. Therapy, support groups, friends who understand, a purpose that gives my pain meaning. So let me ask you, because this matters, have you lived this? Do you know someone who has? Are you watching this and seeing yourself or someone you love reflected in my story? If so, please don't wait 40 years like I almost did. Don't lose decades to someone else's manipulation. Don't sacrifice yourself believing that's what family requires. Family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. Love is supposed to feel safe, not confusing. Trust is supposed to go both ways, not just in one direction. And you, whoever you are, whatever your age, whatever mistakes you think you've made, you deserve better. You deserve to sleep in the middle of your own bed. You deserve to trust your own mind. You deserve to live without fear in your own home. Leave a comment if this story touched you. Share it if you think someone needs to hear it. Hit that like button and subscribe so this message reaches the people who need it most. Because somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting in their house feeling confused and scared and alone, thinking they're the only one. They're not. We're here. We survived. And so can they.